As you can see in front of me here, I've gotten all the ingredients measured out. All of you were given the instructions to have all your ingredients ready to go. So we're not doing chopping, we're not doing measuring and so forth. A couple of pointers I'd like to make initially, and this has to do with healthy activities. Everything that I'm doing today are recommendations, so I'm not going to continue to say this is what I recommend or this is what I suggest. But one of the things that I do suggest is that you remove any rings that you have on your hands. We do not use kitchen towels for this cooking demonstration. Everything is going to be done with a paper towel. Okay. So I'm going to remove some of the stuff that I have on the counter here. So we're going to start with the making the pasta. Now, one of the things about the pasta, when we get it all put together, we're going to wrap it with plastic wrap. Typically, you want to allow that dough to rest for a couple hours. What that does is that all the ingredients tend to marinate a lot better, and the dough becomes a little creamier, but we don't have that time today, so we're going to wrap it in saran wrap. It'll rest as long as it takes us to make the creamy tomato sauce. We'll show you up close about how much you should have, and it's about 1.5 teaspoons, not tablespoons. Okay, so I've got our all-purpose flour and our semolina, according to the recipe, 3/4 cup of each. Okay, now I'm going to be adding the three seasons and the Italian seasoning. Okay, so we've got our dry ingredients, and you want to whisk the 2 flours, the salt, and the Italian seasoning. Okay, we've got our tablespoons of olive oil and our water. We're going to add that. We've got our eggs, 1 egg, 2 egg yolks. So what I've got is a meat fork. It's a small 2-prong meat fork, and I'm going to start mixing this up. Now, a lot of cook shows, you'll see where they'll put a pile of flour on the table. They'll have you make a well, put the eggs and so forth inside the well. I don't like doing that. I feel that if you get a better mix, you've got more control if you're using it in a bowl. A 2-prong fork also works better than a regular fork, because a regular fork is going to get plugged up. So I'm going to take my rubber spatula and try to thoroughly incorporate this. You'll notice that it's got kind of a granular quality to it. You might be thinking that you need to add moisture to it. Don't do it. Okay, so I'm going to incorporate as best I can that flour and the eggs and the oil, and it'll look pretty grainy to you. Good. Okay, so now I've got a separate bowl of semolina flour. I've got it in a separate bowl because I don't want to dip into the bag of flour and use it to dust the table, because then you're contaminating that flour that's in the bag. So we'll put some of this out in the middle of our table, spread it around. Now you're going to take your dough and start kneading it. You're going to be combining it and pushing your knuckles into it, and you're going to try to just get it to where it forms a ball. Just keep working it. It's going to seem challenging at first because it looks like it's not going to all hold together, but it will. So you'll find that there's crumbs in the bottom of the bowl. Just keep picking those crumbs up. You can push your ball into the crumbs. Okay, you may find that there's still some crumbs in the bottom of this. Don't have to be too worried about it. Okay, now what we're gonna do, you should end up with about a softball size pile of dough. Okay, so now we're gonna pull a little of the plastic wrap. Okay, normally when you get to this point, like I said earlier, you're gonna want, when you have the time, you'd want to have this set for a couple hours, but we don't have that time today. So this is called a bench scraper. And I'm just gonna file this up over here because we're gonna make a mess in a little bit, in a little while later when we start rolling out the pasta. Okay, I'm gonna use, to make the creamy pasta sauce, I'm gonna use a sauce pot as opposed to a saute pan. So this is what I'm using, to get a good idea here. So I'm gonna add the oil and the butter. We're gonna want the oil and the butter to get a little bit warm. And we don't want it to be so hot that when you put the onions in it, it starts to spatter. We don't want that. But what we do want is when we put the onions and the garlic in, that it starts to simmer right away. The end result is for the onions to end up being translucent. So I like using shallots because they are kind of a cross between an onion and a garlic. And for all the sauces that I do, I use shallots. I'm adding a little more olive oil, and this is just experience. It could be that I had a larger than usual shallot, and so I'm just making a value judgment. So I added a little bit more. Olive oil. Now I've added the white wine to the bouillon, and I'm going to wire whip this so that I get that bouillon incorporated into the white wine. The real important part of the white wine is not so much for the flavor, but it's for diluting this bouillon. Because if you don't, that bouillon will go into the bottom of the pan and brown and start to stick. So it's important that you liquefy that bouillon. Okay, so our onions and the shallots and the garlic, the vegetable base, and the white wine are in the pot. What we want to do is get these onions to get translucent. Adding that white wine, because it was kind of cold, took away the heat. So I'm cranking the heat up back to about 6. And again, what we want to end up with are translucent onions. We don't want to burn them. We definitely don't want to burn the garlic. So the next thing we're going to do is add our tomatoes and our Italian seasoning and sugar. So I'm adding the tomatoes. We're going to leave the temperature up around 6. These tomatoes essentially have already been stewed, so they're already cooked for the most part. So we're not necessarily cooking the tomatoes as much as we're warming it up. We're incorporating them into the onions and so forth. Okay, I'm going to turn my water pot on now. Okay, and when we get to the point where we're going to be cooking the pasta, you do not want to have a vigorously boiling pot of water. And I'm going to take my pastry scraper and cut this into 4s. Okay, so I'm going to work this dough a little bit more. And to be perfectly honest, this does feel a little bit dry to me. So I'm going to put it back in the bowl. A lot of this stuff is trial and error. And so I'm going to add olive oil. Okay, so now we're going to start rolling this out. And we want to get these noodles to be about as thin as you can possibly make them. I'm going to add some more semolina to my bowl here. All those ingredients come up to temperature. It won't take as much when you're simmering it. I've turned it down to about 4. Okay, now I'm adding the salt. And we'll give that a little bit of a twist. And what is your noodles? I'm going to gently fold in. Now you can crank the heat back up a little bit. And so when you're stirring these, again, you want to be really gentle. Heavy cream to our tomatoes. Because I've got the tomatoes turned down really low. Going to incorporate that. The cream will add a real nice richness to this creamy tomato. I'm going to add a dollop of, or a ladle of pasta water. Say about 3/4 of a ladle. Add that to our tomato. And you'll see that in a lot of recipes. To be honest, I don't know why, but kind of. Okay, so now we'll put the rest of the sauce on. And I'll put a little cheese on now, because we're going to be mixing this all together.
Perché ne sono fiero, sono un italiano vero.